I'm really proud of this program. Voices for Liberty is a one-of-a-kind program that is filling a big gap in the conversation. We have a lot of people talking about free speech, for and against. We have a lot of people arguing about civil rights. We have a lot of people with different opinions about what progress means. This program ties it all together. Free speech is necessary to advance civil rights. You got to use your voice, you got to use your pen to be able to advance civil rights and make progress possible. And if we let that go, we're all going to go backwards. So this program helps keep that strong connection between those three concepts.
Voices for Liberty reminds us that freedom does not come at anyone's expense, but that we all benefit when the liberties of every citizen are protected.
The Voices for Liberty program has been just amazing at providing feedback via really eminent scholars who pay close attention to drafts and provide comments and suggestions, and it's really been extremely helpful in turning a project from an idea into a final published paper.
Yeah, it was very lovely getting to meet prior to this symposium, prior to today, with the other authors and with genuinely critical, but constructively critical commentators who allowed us to refine our ideas and allowed us to go back home, sit with the paper a little bit, redo it, and come out here with the finished product. It's just so important to have that debate again on the free speech theme in order to come up with something that's at its peak place.
The Voices for Liberty Initiative Symposium has been so mind-expanding and interesting and inspiring, because as much as I have already thought about the positive and mutually reinforcing interrelationship between free speech and other human rights, I have learned new dimensions of that interrelationship. For example, Anastasia Boden's wonderful paper about Myra Bradwell really shows how women's equality has depended upon robust free speech, and I consider that to be such an important understanding in a climate and environment where we have too many people who support women's rights, unfortunately arguing that freedom of speech is antithetical to those rights rather than the opposite. We can't have women's rights without strong freedom of speech.
I think this is a really great project because we live in a time when free speech has come to be, I think, perceived by many people and coded as an ideological position that only is serving one side of the spectrum, and I think that's a mistake. I think what we're trying to do is foster research that helps explore and recover the history of how free speech has always been, in fact, a crucial tool that served the goals of social progress, of helping marginalized groups move forward, enabling them to state their case, enabling them to get acceptance and to win legal rights and social rights, social recognition. And it's unfortunate that we've come to a place where a lot of young people, especially on campuses, seem to get the idea that free speech is somehow irremediably in conflict with our aspirations to equality, to inclusion. And so I think this is really a great project trying to sort of recover, I think, what used to be a pretty robust understanding in the civil rights community that free speech was foundational. And also I think it's important to have honest discussion about the places where if there are tensions, then the question is, what's the best way to reconcile them? Because these are all very important principles.
Yeah, I think one thing that came up today is there's an important question of whether liberalism, basically social tolerance and rule of law, whether that's a bundle, an entire package that moves together on average, or whether you can just pick and choose from it off a menu like at a buffet. And we still really don't know. In practice, they tend to move together, but a lot of countries around the world have to figure out whether they can just pick one item off the menu and still have a great meal.
So I'm a big fan of the initiative because it addresses a key point about free speech that I think a lot of people, especially young people these days, miss. And that is how central free speech has been towards what have generally been seen as progressive civil rights movements throughout American history, probably throughout world history, but especially throughout American history. Free speech was critical to the anti-slavery movement, it's critical to the civil rights movement, critical to the women's rights movement, gay rights movement, and a wide variety of others. But I think it's important to remind people how much what are generally thought of as kind of left progressive civil rights movement, how much they owe to free speech, and conversely, how much free speech law owes to the experience of those movements.
Voices of Liberty has provided me with feedback and insight that I would not have access to otherwise. The caliber of the commenters is just stellar, and it's the collegialness and the thoroughness is been amazing.
Voices for Liberty is a great initiative that I've been having the pleasure of participating in for the last 2 years. I think it's a great opportunity to bring together scholars and practitioners and advocates of a variety of political and organizational backgrounds to discuss some new ideas and some new scholarship.
So there's an interesting range of views, a lot of discussion of those views, and so you'll hear new perspectives and hear new aspects of the law and of the history of the country. One of the takeaways of the panel that I was on is thinking about, so the First Amendment is broader than freedom of speech. It's freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and thinking of the interrelationship between those in terms of the case law is something important to think.
It was wonderful the way they organized it, because I had two people read the paper. I came in, I think it was June, and they read over the paper and they made very constructive comments, and I took those comments to heart as much as I could, revised the paper as much as I could, and now I get a chance from one of the same commentators but also a different one to get additional feedback before I send it out for publication. This is tremendously helpful. We authors are all in our cocoons, think we know the score, but we don't get as many opportunities from hearing from people that are going to offer that kind of constructive criticism when we're in the preparation stage.
For me, as an historian, most of the panelists and the papers are written by non-historians, lawyers, political theorists, philosophers, and it is very heartening to hear different disciplinary perspectives, to hear people debate issues from a perspective, from a vantage point that I don't normally think about. Very smart people, and I also think that it's an incredibly open, rich dialogue that you don't normally get at history conferences. So I think that's also, in the spirit of debate and free speech, this lives up to that.
Well, it really turned me onto this idea and this research path of looking at this interplay between free speech and civil rights and looking at it in a particular context, which I think led to a treasure trove of really interesting information. I think if you're interested in freedom of speech, in secular rights, in civil rights, both historically and today, there's a lot of interesting scholarship that's happening here at the center.
Identity. What does it mean? How much should we take it into consideration? All those different kind of things. What do people want? Right? A lot of people are so used to terms in the context of civil rights that they don't understand them in the context of critical social justice, which is why diversity, equity, and inclusion mean different things now than they did back then. People don't realize that, and I think they need to realize that, and symposia like this will help with that.